All right, it's a few minutes after. Should we go ahead and get started, or give it a couple more minutes? The first part of this is just introducing ourselves and going over some of the logistics, which I think people probably have down now that we're at the end of this conference. But this is Breakout 8. So if you expected to see the Cure Fair Working Group, the current state of curation practices that support computational reproducibility, you are in the right place. So thank you for hanging in there and coming on this last day of the conference. All right, next slide. First slide. Okay, so collaborative notes, you saw that link. I don't think anybody else has come in, just in case the link is in the chat. We will be providing all of the materials from this and previous work from the Cure Fair Working Group at our OSF page, and that link is there. Also, it's in the notes, so you could copy and paste that if you need to. But that's where you'll have access to these slides and slides from previous meetings. So as you know, obviously muted right now. If you have any questions, you could send those through the chat at any time. So we have 4 co-chairs here, so we'll be monitoring that to answer any questions, or to, if you want to kind of prompt some conversation about a certain topic. If you want to speak, we want to make sure you're seen and we don't miss anybody. So if you could use the raise your hand if you wish to speak, using the little icons in the participants section. Is that right? Yes. And then also, this is being recorded and will be made publicly available, just so you know. So we will have a record of this, and for folks who couldn't come to this particular session, there are so many great concurrent sessions that I'm so glad that these are being recorded. So I feel like I have part 2 of attending this conference, a whole series of videos I'd like to watch. All right, next slide. And like I said, I think we all know the drill, but just in case, some tips: you have your mute button. The participant and chats buttons are good to keep open. And then if you have some reactions, you can use those if you like. Those are fun. And besides that, we've been doing this for several months now. So I think we've got it. Next slide. And for the agenda today, what we're going to do is just go over the introduction, give you some information, remind you of what our work is about for the Cure Fair Working Group. And then we do have some updates on the activities that have been happening since the last time we've all gotten together. And then we're going to engage you all and maybe do something a little risky, a little fun. We'll see. This is all Tom's idea, so I'm just going to put that on him. But it's going to be great to really get some feedback from you all, get some information. And just to introduce your co-chairs, I'm Tumai Christian, the Assistant Director for Archives at the Odum Institute at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And Florio?
I'm Florio Arguilias. I'm a research associate at the Cornell Institute for Social and Economic Research, Cornell University. I manage the Resource Reproduction Service of CISR.
Tom?
Hi, I'm Tom Honeyman. I'm the program manager for the software program at the Australian Research Data Commons, and that's in the software and platforms theme of the ARDC.
And last but not least, Limor.
Hi, everyone. I'm Limor Peer. I'm Associate Director for Research at the Institution for Social and Policy Studies at Yale University. And among other things, at ISPS, I manage a data archive. I think that I am going to take over for the next few slides. Yes?
Yes.
And tell you a little bit about Cure Fair, the work group, our charter, our deliverables, our plans. And then we're going to talk a little bit about having some updates about what we've been able to do. We were only recently endorsed. Well, I don't know, time is very strange these days. It seems recent, and yet it's a few months ago now. It was in July that we received recognition from RDA to start as a work group. The goal of the Cure Fair work group is to establish standard-based guidelines for curation of reproducible and fair data in code. So some of the things that we're doing are examining current practices around curation for reproducible and fair data in code. We're looking at specifically what we're focused on. Some of us with our background has been on reproducibility, and we want to see how those current practices are aligning with FAIR principles. So really the motivating question for us is, with the goal of reproducibility of scientific results and in light of FAIR principles, what is an effective curation workflow? So we're coming at it from the curation perspective, but we are trying to take into account reproducibility and FAIR. So in terms of our deliverables, we are hoping to have a final report with a couple of interim outputs. So the first will be a snapshot of the current state of cure-fair practices. And we're going to paint that picture drawing on community surveys and reviews of practice. Our second deliverable will be to provide a synthesis of these practices relating to curating for computational reproducibility and FAIR principles. And then finally, as we said, our final goal is to have a report that outlines these guidelines that will be standard-based for cure-fair best practices in terms of publishing and archiving computationally reproducible studies. So we always feel that we need to pause at this point for a moment and talk a little bit about terminology, because I think reproducibility is a topic or a phrase, a term that has different meanings in different communities, although I do think we are converging on a meaning right around now. In terms, we as the scientific community are really converging on a meaning. I think curation means different things. We had a conversation the other day, you know, repository means different things, documentation means different things. So it's a little tricky. And so we want to be pretty clear about what we are about and how we are interpreting these terms. So when we talk about reproducibility, we're really talking about computational reproducibility. And by that, we mean the ability to repeat the analysis and arrive at the same results. So it's not necessarily collecting new data and trying the method. It's not necessarily taking data and writing a new analysis code. And it's certainly not reproducing a whole experiment in different circumstances, different conditions with different parameters and seeing if we get a similar result. So for us, we think this is the most basic step in open science and reproducibility and in transparency and integrity, which is, can you take the data and the code and arrive at the same results? And that definition has been endorsed and promoted now by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine in their report from 2019. It's something Victoria Staden has been talking about for a while, and that's our kind of area where we're situated. Also important, we think, since curation is in the name of this work group, to explain a little bit what we mean specifically by curation. So really, we're talking about the management and the preservation of digital data over the long term. So, you know, the Digital Curation Center has this definition about over the life cycle of the data. Here, if you think about this very first phrase, the very first definition here, digital data in a broad sense, anything that's digital, how do we manage and preserve it over the long term? But another thing that I think is really important to tease out, and Christine Borgman is good about reminding us of that, is that curation is really a set of actions that are aimed at determining basically what research outputs are worthy of sharing, preserving, and why, for whom, by whom, for how long. So there's a bunch of decisions that have to be made by these organizations that are really taking possession or at least stewardship of these materials. So, okay, so in this framework, the object of curation is the reproducible file bundle and its component parts. So what we mean by that is that, again, stepping back, if we're talking about reproducing results, computational reproducibility, all the things that have to go into to enacting or executing that computational reproducibility are considered part of the file bundle. We can talk a little bit about what that means and what the boundaries might be, but we're thinking of it as a whole and the component parts. And then we are thinking about how we take care of all of these materials to make sure that they are continue to be accessible and available for independent reuse for the long term. So, sorry, a couple screens here. Oops. Okay, so we organized our work group into 4 subgroups to just help us move along a little more quickly and to give opportunities for people to get involved. So we have 4 groups. One really focuses on definitions of CureFair, one on practices, one on challenges, and one on CureFair within RDA and within the larger community, and thinking about sort of parallels and overlaps. So the next section, we're going to get some updates from each of the group. I want to take 1 minute and just thank all the people who have signed up for the subgroups already and contributed greatly and volunteered their time and met with us and did the work. And it's been really a joy to see the interest around this topic in the community. So thank you to all of you who have been with us and to all of you who are new. We're happy that you're here. And if you are interested in joining the work groups, there's a link right there that you can go to and sign up. So
before we go into those details, Limor, there's a question in the chat that I think
oh, okay, great.
Let me considering the definition of computational reproducibility. So you described the application of analysis code together with the underlying data to repeat the analysis. And the question is this working group going to address computational reproducibility of large-scale model simulations run on HPC systems? Because then we would need to consider the hardware issues as well.
Yeah, I mean, does any of my co-chairs want to take this question?
I think it's fair to say that we're not ruling anything out at this point, but we are trying to approach a tractable set of, or a scope that is tractable for a working group that runs over 1.5 years. So we do want to know, and it will still form part of the outputs of the group to understand the variety and breadth of the problem. So we do actually really value that kind of input at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
And Limor, I do think that does lead into subgroup 1's work.
Yes.
And so what we're trying to do with subgroup 1 is to provide a broader understanding of what it means to curate research artifacts. So the question of what our scope is in terms of our definitions is part of the work of subgroup 1. So one of the things we're doing is just doing a general scan of literature for definitions of computational reproducibility. And we know what definition we're working with, but we know that how that definition is applied to different research objects or different contexts, different types of research methodologies or different domains. There could be some nuances in those definitions. And so we want to make sure that we do address those. Whether or not our final guidelines can address all those issues, probably not. We want to acknowledge that there are some differences that, as we always say, one size may not fit all when we have these guidelines, but to acknowledge that there's lots of considerations depending on the context. So that's what we want to do there. And then also we want to take those definitions and think about curation in terms of each of the component parts of the reproducible file bundle. What does it mean to curate data and code and documentation for reproducibility purposes, and then hopefully mapping that to FAIR principles. And I should point out that there are other groups doing this, especially a lot of the software working groups are already thinking about this and doing some mapping work, and so which is really great. So we will be in touch. We'll be peeking at your materials and to learn more from you on that because you have a great group that's coming around the software. So I appreciate that. And we have a small but mighty group. It's me leading this group with Tom, and we have Kaylin Boyd from Harvard who's working with this group. So if you'd like to join and if you have some input, please sign up. And I would love to hear more about these other contexts and these nuances. So, you know, this example here with the computational reproducibility of large-scale model simulations, that's exactly what I'd love to learn. And so that's group 1. And next slide for group 2. So subgroup 2, I think, is kind of a fun one, because what we want to do here is identify organizations or groups that have fully implemented CureFair workflows. So we know that they're out there. Some of us in the that represent the co-chairs have this implemented, but we would like to see a broader range of how this implementation is happening. And so what we have been doing so far is getting a list of those, and this conference has been great for identifying more groups doing some of this work. And then we have been working on a standard form to create profiles of each of these groups. So, so identifying what do we want to know from these organizations, what do we intend on learning? And so we're compiling those questions into a form so that we can then contact these organizations and collect that information. And hopefully this will be included in the final output so we could see and compare across these different implementations of CureFair. So again, join us. Oh, and the folks who are in this group, I have a list. So I'm leading this group, and we have Sherry Lake from Virginia, Katie Mika also from Harvard, and Andrew Davison. So small also, but mighty.
Great. So Florio and I are going to share our report for Subgroup 3 challenges. We also have a small and mighty group, and we're actually going to preview a little bit of some of the results of the work that we've done. So the idea of Subgroup 3 is to try to describe the challenges that people are encountering when they're attempting to computationally reproduce their results or anyone's result. For whatever purpose. So that might be for the purpose of, just computationally reproduce to see if they can get the same result, or, whatever the intended purpose. But the idea is, can they do this? And then can we map potential curatorial remedies to the challenges that they encounter? So that is, what are the actions that curators can take to ensure that computational reproducibility of materials can take place if they are stewarding these materials. So our group has been meeting about every other week since September to work on this. And we are trying to collect information from a variety of sources and information about these challenges. So one obvious place to get some insight is the literature. People have been writing about, problems with computational reproducibility, and we're looking into that. We have another subgroup that's looking at conducting longer interviews with several different stakeholders. And then we also are trying to do a little bit of crowdsourcing via a Google form. And so you have the links on the slide here. If you haven't looked at our Google form, it's very brief and it's set up in a user-friendly way. And you can enter there in any information that you have, experiences that you may have had, anecdotes that you, or your frustrations and pain points about what has been challenging when you were trying to do computational reproducibility. If you're interested in talking with us a little bit more at length, if you feel that form doesn't really capture what you have to say, or if you just feel like it would be more useful to do it in a different way, then you can email our group, and the email is on the slide as well, and we can set up a time with you. Before I hand it over to Florio to give us a little bit of preliminary results, again, if anyone is interested in joining us, you can click on that link. And we have, I'm going to have to find my list of people because we do have quite a bit of people. So I'll do that as Florio is talking, and then we'll be able to properly thank everyone. So I'm going to advance here, Florio, and you could take it away.
All right, thank you, Limor. As Limor mentioned, we created a Google form to gather challenges faced by various stakeholders when curating for reproducibility. We used Atlas TI to manage and process the responses. We identified and coded the challenges and mapped them to the FAIR principle. We also added an other category for challenges that we considered outside the FAIR principles. So far, we have recorded a total of 43 responses. Respondents represented a wide variety of roles. A majority were researchers, but we had research software engineers, data professionals, reproducibility advocates, data scientists, journal editors, students, and teachers as well. A majority were from STEM domain, and about a fourth were from the social sciences. Next slide, Limor. Now, these slides shows the challenges while curating for reproducibility mapped to the FAIR principles. Under findable, the challenge is difficulty finding data. Under accessible, oh, Limor, can you move back one slide? Right there. Oops. Under accessible, the challenges were related to authors not making available the code, data, and other documentation, the use of proprietary software, and the high cost of archiving big data. Now, under interoperable, we found the challenges files do not work in another computing environment. Reusability seems to be the most dominant among the challenges. Under reusable, challenges relate to little or no documentation, code not working, are obsolete, or written in a different format. Software version changed, differences between operating systems. There's also uncertainty about whether the reproducibility package will still work in the future. And others find curating for reproducibility very hard to do. Next slide, Limor. There were challenges that we couldn't map to the FAIR principles, but important to note. These relate to journals whose review process is slow to change, not flexible to publishing a correction, and have increasing requirements for authors. Other challenges are lack of training or incentives or rewards to curate for reproducibility. We also, respondents were also voluntarily offered recommendations and solutions to address these challenges. They recommended journal standards for reporting and documentation, more training and incentives to encourage reproducibility, use of open software or making source codes freely available, inclusion of libraries and dependencies in the reproducibility package, institutional support for curating for reproducibility, and a use of a third party that verifies reproducibility of the study. Respondents solved or will solve the challenges they encountered proactively by creating their own tool or writing their own code or updating the code. Other solutions were to provide better documentation, journals allowing publications of corrections, and a standardized method of reporting. So those are so far a summary of or our preliminary findings of the challenge that we gathered from the Google form that we posted. Over to you, Tom.
Okay, and so the final group is a subgroup that is looking to synthesize and bridge RDA outputs, recommendations, and working group or interest group activities aligned with CureFair. And I think it's fair to say that it goes beyond RDA groups as well. So thank you already to Neil and Dan for throwing up some further contacts that we need to make. So I've only just taken over chairing this this group from Anthony, and thank you very much for your work so far on that. We are it's very early stages for this group, but then this group really sits in response to other activities that are going on around this area. So at the moment, we're just gathering details for existing activities and going to take some targeted approaches to individuals over the coming months. The group is open for input, and you can either join the group following the link down there, or if you just want to reach out and let us know about your existence, then there's an email address to let us know. So maybe you don't want to partake in the activity so much as make sure that we're aware of some other activity. I would hope to work towards a coordination activity at Plenary 17. And that's basically it for Subgroup 4 at the moment. So I think we're going to switch screens
Yeah,
now.
before we do that, I did want to thank Subgroup 3 members, Tom, Sonia Barbosa,
Yep.
Andrew Davison, Wolmar Ackerston, and Nadika Milovic, all of whom have been already doing a lot of work, and thank you. So I am going to stop sharing, Tom, and you're going to take over. Yes?
Is this a good time to ask if anyone has any questions while we're switching over?
There have been plenty of questions going on in the chat. Oops. Can you see the activity slide?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we are going to have a crack at an interactive activity that allows everybody to talk at once. We're going to annotate the screen, basically. So if you've not done this before, I just want to quickly run you through how it works. You at the top of the slide that I'm sharing here, you should see a little menu with view options. And if you click on that and then scroll down to the point where it says annotate, if you click on that button, then the toolbar that you see on the center to right side of this slide should pop up, and you should be able to annotate on the screen that you're viewing at a time. No problem if you want to start mucking around with that right now, but just a few things as we do that. Absolutely, awards will go to the best annotation at this point. But mainly today, we're going to be using the text. If you want to type in some text, we're definitely going to be using those stamps. Again, if you click on that, you'll get a variety of stamps. So, choose the most creative stamp you like. You can undo the things that you have typed on the screen. And that may well come in handy if you find that you are accidentally if you're distracted and you flick between things and you start writing all over the screen, which does happen when we do this. I love that smiley, whoever did that, great job. And I do have the ability you can clear all your annotations in one go. I also have the ability, or the host does possibly, to clear all annotations. And that's what we're going to do. If we could clear the annotations. Oh, and one more thing, if you want to turn off annotation and regain control of your mouse, then click the annotate button again in the toolbar in the Zoom window. Okay, so which I have just fallen victim to. Right, so by way of practicing, if we could, if you could just start by ticking where you're joining us from today. I know you did write that in the text, but have a crack at it. Using the stamp tool. If a stamp doesn't quite do it for you, you can circle your country. That's fine by me. Right, well, I'm getting a strong sense of 3 geographic locations, roughly speaking, that everyone is joining from today. Oh, except go for it, Florio. Okay, terrific. Thanks, everyone. And I'm just going to clear that slide now, and we'll progress on to the, I've done the thing. Progress on to the next slide. Could you now also, if once I clear those drawings, could you now basically tell me what is the primary role at your institution? So please tick the closest one that works for you. If you're an other, perhaps you could have a crack at typing in some text next to your tick to give us a sense of what your primary role is. Okay, that's terrific.
So Tom, are you saving this?
Yes, I will save it. I think we've got a good sense of, I'm just going to give the other crowd a little bit longer so that if they wanted to type in their perspective, they can do that. We're all learning here, so I'm just going to give a little bit more time.
Do we have someone thinking outside the box here?
Yes. Okay, I'm just going to save the screen. And, but that's good. That actually looks like we've roughly got 4 groups here. If I throw the others in with the IT folk, essentially. So we may use that for our breakout grouping. Okay. So now I think we have an additional slide, right?
Yes, we do.
Oops. Okay, and I'll just clear the annotations. And what type of research artifact do you primarily focus on in your role?
What's the difference between code and software?
Well, that's actually designed to fish out what you think is the difference, essentially. Some would say they're all the same. Well, it's not surprising that it's a little data heavy at an RDA plenary. But I'd say we've got a roughly even spread over the other types as well, which is good. I think that we're still probably leaning towards using the roles as the way to do the breakouts later in the call. And 2 ticks for do as well. And nobody's throwing up anything other than those main categories as well. But okay, I'm going to save that now. You can pick more than one, incidentally, if people didn't realize that in the chat. Okay. And last question, I believe, isn't it, Tuai? If you just want to give us a shout out to who you think is doing good curation for reproducibility at the moment, it could be a publisher, could be an archive, could be a set of researchers in a particular field. If you want to just let us know, that's fantastic. Incidentally, I thoroughly recommend defacing the slides while we go along here. I give brownie points for that. If you could let us know by typing the text in. This is a tricky one. When you hit enter on the text, that's when it appears on the screen. And that's often the magical moment that you discover that you've been typing in the same spot as everybody else. There's a select tool under the annotation bar that allows you to move the text around afterwards. So if you happen to end up typing a bit of text and it goes over the top, just pick it up and move it around. Oh, I think adding the people in was perfect to my.
Yes, I love it.
So far, they're all pretty familiar ones, which I'm glad to say, including not sure anyone is. I am okay with that perspective at this point. Because that really gets into what we mean by computational reproducibility as well. Yes, if you can't add the text, I'll add it for you. You can just throw it in the
I beat you to it, Tom. I got software heritage in there.
okay. Yeah, I'll undo mine. Yeah, actually, the love hearts next to the ones that you think are particularly good is also welcome in this particular drawing. So if any of these solutions are ones that you agree are doing a good job, then please let us know. I'd love to know, the unsure or not sure anyone perspective as well. And pick a few myself. Comments are welcome as well. I'm just going to take those hearts under the activity bar as saying that you love this activity. Yeah, I might connect up some of the repeats. Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks everyone for that. I think that the thing that emerged as the easiest way to break up the groups at this point is the roles. So I'm just going to go back to the, I'm just going to save that. Turn off the annotations, go back a few slides. And clear the annotations and going to, we're going to have 4 breakout rooms. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Bearing in mind that those people that ticked other, if you could join the IT group, that would be great. And what I'd like you to do now is if you can pull up the participants list and then hover your mouse over your own name, you may have to click on more, but to rename yourself with the number of the room that you'll be going into. And then we will start to build out those breakout rooms and go into those breakout rooms for what timing should we be looking for? About 30 minutes to give us a 15-minute report back at the end.
Maybe a little bit less to make sure we have time to report and that we're done on time. So maybe 25 minutes.
Okay, that's great.
Something like that. Yeah.
And I think Tumai, you should be able to specify the automatic closing time. Who would like to, amongst our co-chairs, excuse me, everyone while you join our conversations, if you have not already given a number to yourself, I'm happy to go with any of those rooms.
I'll do 2.
Yep.
Tumai, you can.
I'm quite happy to take group 4.
You'll be in 4.
I'm sorry, I missed how I'm supposed to add a number.
That's fine. If you just want to specify the number you want in the chat, then we'll take care of it.
Okay. Thank you.
It's happening. Just clicking some buttons here. I think I don't have too many more people to assign.
Have we got a roughly even distribution across the rooms? Like,
yes,
none of the rooms are.
Are there's some people not assigned yet?
I have Karsten and Mandy who aren't assigned yet, but I'm going to put because room 2 is filling up, so let's go with,
I think room 4 is going to be the best too.
Okay, you guys.
Three.
Not to be competitive.
So competitive.
Yeah, well, it's can't help myself.
3's looking pretty good, I gotta say.
Yeah.
So I'm going to assign the other couple folks who haven't. So we have 4 or 5 folks, and then so I'll go ahead and open those rooms. Let me set the time. So how much time did we say?
25 minutes.
25. Gotcha.
So that will have us returning with
About
20 minutes to spare.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're going.
Wait, not yet.
Oh wait, not yet.
Yep. Can you say? Can you ask them what the activity is going to be?
Or we can do that in the rooms.
Yeah.
Keep us the suspense.
Ready?
Do you remember, Florio? It's in the slides.
Yes, yes. I have the slides open also.
Great.
Okay. I think I did this right. No? Close all rooms. Okay. Everybody has 60 seconds. So unless you have any last thoughts, we'll just take a breath.
I missed what it is you do at the Odom Institute.
I'm the assistant director for archives, so I oversee our archive services and operations. And Mandy is the one who makes things happen. So all of the rooms should have gotten the 60 seconds timer, and we should be seeing them soon. We've got 10 seconds to wrap it up.
Welcome back, everyone.
Awesome. Welcome back.
I think we're just missing one person, unless they have left us. Florio, I have you down on the run sheet to just guide us through the report backs from each room.
Florio, you're going to have to unmute. There we go.
So we're going to start with the reporter from Group 1, the researchers. That will be Anthony.
Hello, everybody. So we covered a number of different topics, and I'm just going to kind of run through them for the sake of time. So one main challenge was how to align multiple different workflows and capture all of the decisions within those workflows, especially when you're working in an institutional environment where you had siloed dedicated teams overseeing distinct steps and materials. So someone who might be extracting the data from a centralized repository, another team cleans or munges that data, another team analyzes that data, another team reports out. How do you try to align all of those and document them? Often domain scientists are making decisions, and some of those might be computational, some of them might be methodological. Outside of that workflow. So how do you make sure that those are represented and documented within a computational environment? And there's no structured environment for tracking mini workflows. This was a highlight from the climate space, though I think it applies to multiple different other areas as well. We had a discussion about when conducting work in a high performance computing space or similar environment, researchers often are timid and are hesitant to conduct work in a black box environment, or where you have automated workflows or operations that aren't necessarily transparent on the front end. So how do you make sure that those are documented, or how do you kind of limit the hesitation to work in that environment? We had some discussions about the status of manuscripts when they go to publication. So how do you make sure that all of the materials are shareable, all the materials are documented, and especially how do you coordinate that with journals during the peer review process? So when you're working with terabytes of data and large stores of data, oftentimes the journals do not want to house and hold that data. So what do they define as kind of the primary data or the final data set or the final workflow that you want to be able to reproduce and share with that final publication? So one example that was presented was from sorry, scrolling a little bit here. So from the kind of climate space, primary data would just be model code and kind of the initial boundaries and environment that code was ran in, with little that was little of that actual data. So it's just model data. So this was offered by Karsten, and I hope he can speak more to it as well, of like how to represent what is primary data, what are the real full computational environment that you want to be able to represent in a final publication, and how you work with journals to coordinate that so that they aren't being overstored by having to store too much, but we can have the full workflow represented. Then we talked a bit about standards for organizing files or documenting methodologies or organizing and documenting environments and workflows. So a few examples were shared there. And then I think the final point we had was, when we're talking about containers, has there been any discussion about how to make containers themselves fair? So if Docker isn't going to be around in 10 years, or other kind of container environments, if those resources are going to change over 10 years, how do we make sure that we're applying those same standards to the containers themselves, and not just the data, the workflows, the code and software, but keep in mind that full container environment.
All right, thank you, Anthony. Now let's move on to the reporter for group 2.
Hello. So our group was people working with repositories. So we definitely had a dominating curatorial perspective. And after we came up with our initial brainstorm of challenges, we immediately identified 2 overarching themes, which were technical limitations and then human limitations. And so in technical, we had things like that, code that wouldn't run outside the researcher's original environment, or that wouldn't run at all. And on the human side, we had things like mismatched expectations between the researcher and the curator, or issues with communication. And I think the really illuminating aspect of it was, although we often come to reproducibility with a very sort of machine actionable mindset, we had far more challenges in the human category overall. And even many of our technical limitations were kind of also human limitations. For example, highly specialized code. So I work with a generalized repository. So sometimes someone, who's devoted their entire life to this one very specific field will bring us code, and I have to be able to evaluate it. And I have no idea what I'm looking at. So that's a bit of a technical limitation in terms of software, but it's also a human limitation, is that I just don't have the same PhD. So yeah, that was our main summary.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Nicole. Let's move on to group 3. We just have about 10 minutes left.
All right.
So make sure that
I'll make it fast. And I'm reporting on behalf of group 3. And we actually covered a lot of the things that group 2 covered in terms of those technical challenges and some of the human challenges. One thing that came up first was capacity. We have a desired level of curation. We want to do the whole fair workflow, but there are issues in terms of time and cost. And some of that time can be because of the big data, large scale computations where analyses can go on for months. And also time can be in trying to access restricted or sensitive data, where you have to go through this lengthy approval process. And then once you get there, you need to have the proficiency to handle these data and then run it on your machine for months. So, that time just kind of piles up. We also discussed some things when we think about some solutions, identifying things, persistent identifiers, and how we apply them to the reproducible file bundle, the granularity of it, when and how do we apply those? So, and also thinking about the advantages of doing that, where we can automate some things. So, one group that was mentioned was the identifiers for instrumentation. So all the calibrations are attached to the identifier of the instrumentation because of those cultural issues that, if we can't get them to do it, perhaps we could automate it and bring it into our technology. And then finally, there was one other, the social challenges. The other thing is, trying to shift the mindset from reproducibility and openness being from something that's punitive to something that is that's welcome. As a community enterprise, that it's not, oh, somebody's going to find out. It's, somebody's going to point out, and I can learn, and I can make my research better. So I think that's most of the things. There's more, but in the interest of time, let's talk to group 4.
Go ahead, group 4, reporter.
Thank you. Okay, so to set us at ease, Moran kicked us off. So our room was very despite being the catch-all, was very software heavy. So we had a lot of discussion around the areas good and bad in research software, and a lot of clarification around terminology and splits and things that we needed to consider if we were going to try and tackle computational reproducibility. And I'm sorry, Room, we didn't talk about who might lead the report back, and I've just selfishly grabbed it for myself. Yeah, Moran kicked us off by just set us at ease by saying, well, this is a much harder problem to solve than the FAIR principles. It's much more specific, and it's going to make a lot more determinations about ways of doing things than a set of principles is going to do. But we had some pointers from Neil about some great work that was going on in software preservation in the British Library and also at the Internet Archive that we should be checking out. And also the Software Preservation Network and emulation environments with the easy work. And also a DPC blog article that I'm going to have to read that I have to admit I haven't read, I don't think, on software preservation. But generally speaking, I think we all agreed that getting the settings right on software environment sustainability was going to be a key issue here. Dan gave us some thorny issues to consider with regards to software. That software has bugs, and it made that reproduction, like precise reproduction of what we of the original work, might not actually be what we want to do as that software is updated. He also pointed out that some types of software isn't deterministic. We had a discussion about I guess ephemeral dependencies. If you're pulling in stuff from services, or we were also talking about consumption of resources, particularly large-scale consumption of resources, making reproduction kind of difficult. And so Dan suggested that we might want to make a differentiation between practical versus possible reproducibility. So let's see, HP resources may make reproducibility impractical but not impossible, while using a real-time data stream may make reproducibility impossible. And so some consideration of those. We definitely also talked about identifiers, and shout out to Swids while I'm doing that, and all the other identifiers, to be fair. But yeah, unless anyone from the group wants to chime in and raise any of the mini points that we covered that I've missed.
I think we should wrap up now, the last 2 slides, because we only have 5 more minutes, and I think we're going to be strict about it.
All right.
I just want to acknowledge that we have some back and forth in the chat. I'm trying to copy that, and just in case that's not saved, but thank you for the continuing conversation. It's very, very illuminating and interesting. And I'm sure we'll find ways to get back to this, to these questions. Sorry, Tumai, go ahead.
And it's very affirming as well, knowing that we're not struggling alone. So just to give you a sense of what's going to happen. So we are at the plus 6 months of this working group. So, so we did, so we just went over some of the practices, talked to you about that. The next plenary, we expect to have a synthesis of the best practices after we've done some defining and done some case studies and looked at these challenges. And then finally, our final deliverable in 18 months will be our guidelines for best practices. So we really hope that you will continue to stay engaged with us. our web page has all the information, case statements, our updates. Please join our group. If you want to get even more involved, then you could sign up for a subgroup. I know we've been pushing that, but it would be really great to work with you. Had great conversations in these breakout rooms, so I'd love to talk to you all again. And but if you just like to, keep up, then you could also visit our project page. So we're linking all of our materials and documents there. So it's a nice one-stop shop to get to all the things that may be scattered in different places. So thank you all so much. And the closing session is about to start, and we hope that we'll see you there. So any other last minute comments from the co-chairs?
Oh, great discussion. Thanks everybody for coming along.
Thank you all
everyone.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
folks.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.